The explosion didn't make a sound. It simply unraveled space, cold and absolute, as the Zurak fleet dropped out of warp behind the convoy. 3 seconds later, the first cargo hauler disintegrated in a vortex of plasma and glass. Aeon saw it through the viewport of her shuttle, the shockwave flaring across her retinas like a silent scream. Contact lost with D-22 and D-23, someone reported. Another voice, colder, resigned, whispered, "We're already dead." The Zurak didn't give warnings. Their ships resembled floating obelisks of frost-covered bone, laced with ion weaponry and embedded thruster pods like tumors. Each vessel was cloaked in a translucent shimmer adaptive camouflage that mirrored the asteroid field they hunted in. Predators evolved for the void. Aeon's ship, the Solace Wing Asterisk, was a stripped-down support vessel. No armor, no weapons, just sensors, medbays, and a neural sync module buried under layers of outdated code. She wasn't a soldier. She was a bioempath, a neural resonator, as the Liern Min officially called it. A human gifted, or cursed, with the ability to bridge neural signals between species. Rare, unstable, unwanted. "Brace!" someone shouted. Aeon grabbed the console as a blast tore through the stern. The lights went out, artificial gravity faltered, then everything went white. When she opened her eyes, she was alone. The ship had drifted into a frozen asteroid field, somewhere near the edge of the Shatterfall sector. Static curled across the cracked glass of the communications panel. The hull temperature had dropped below safe thresholds. No signal, no transponder, no rescue. Her hands shook as she pressed the diagnostics key. Oxygen reserves, asterisk 21% asterisk asterisk. Life support, asterisk critical failure asterisk. Radiation shielding, breached asterisk asterisk. Crew count, asterisk 1 asterisk asterisk. She coughed, tasting blood. The right sleeve of her suit was torn, revealing blisters of deep frostbite spreading from her forearm up to her shoulder. Nerve tissue was beginning to crystallize. If she didn't act now, the necrosis would reach her spine. She stared at the emergency injector in her left hand. It contained nanoplast regenerative fluid, a living compound designed to mimic organic tissue repair. But for it to work, the dying part had to be removed. "God damn it," she whispered. Her breath fogged. She set the auto clamp over her upper arm and activated the surgical override. The cold metal tightened. Her fingers spasmed. 5 seconds. A blade hissed free. 4, 3. Her mind went blank. 2, then nothing. She awoke in a pool of her own blood, her right arm ending in a sealed graft of polymer mesh, glowing faint blue. The nanofluid had worked. She was alive, damaged but alive. Aeon slumped against the wall, shivering, in the silence of that drifting grave. She activated her neural interface, an old habit born from long nights in alien labs. Trying to hear something beyond human perception. The implant behind her ear hummed to life. Sensory threads uncoiled from her spine and spread through the frozen hull. Probing for signatures, life, motion, memory, nothing responded. Then a tremor, not physical, not seismic, emotional. Something beneath the asteroid crust stirred, a ripple in the neural field so ancient, so heavy. It felt like grief buried under centuries of ice. She narrowed the sensory spectrum, tuning out noise. That's when she heard it, a rhythm pulsing through sub-zero stone, not mechanical but biological. Living like a heartbeat frozen in time, Aeon crawled toward the rear hatch. The cold stabbed through her lungs, but she pushed on, every breath sharp as broken glass. The shuttle's hull had cracked on impact. Beyond it lay a cavern of compressed blue ice, twisting corridors formed by colliding asteroids, shifting over millennia. Her neural link buzzed stronger the deeper she scanned. And at the center a presence, huge, still, alive. She fell to her knees. Her breath hitched as the outline appeared. Embedded in the ice was a creature the size of a battle cruiser. A serpent-like silhouette with jagged wings folded inward, its body veined with translucent bioluminescent threads. Not mechanical, not silicon, crystal. She had heard the myths. Whispers of the Rakai, a species long extinct, or imprisoned by time and betrayal. Living organisms formed entirely of bioreactive crystal, capable of memory transmission across light years. Called ice dragons by early settlers, they were believed to be the first to wield emotion as a weapon and as a language. Aeon reached for her neural band, hand trembling. "Don't do this," she muttered to herself. "You don't know what it is. You don't know what it wants." But something deep within her, older than reason, answered back. "You've always known." She slid the band over her temple and connected. A sharp jolt ran down her spine, and then voices. Not words, not screams, not commands, just a single thought. Echoing over and over again in the vast, frozen void. "We were once the same." Aeon never chose to be different, but from the moment she first screamed into the fluorescent cradle of the Citadel Institute for Neural Development, her fate was no longer her own. They called her resonant positive, a phrase sterile enough to hide what it truly meant. That her brain didn't just process thoughts, it echoed them, reflected them, absorbed signals that weren't hers and sent them back, layered in emotion. She could feel things that didn't belong to her. People, creatures, machines. The Institute didn't know what to make of her. So they experimented, gently at first, electrodes and visual tests. Then more invasive measures, cranial implants, spinal ports, synthetic dream mapping. By age 7, Aeon had more wires than memories. By 12, she had learned not to cry during the tests. They weren't cruel, the scientists. They didn't laugh at her. They didn't beat her. They just recorded. And that, she later realized, was the real cruelty. She became a prodigy of the neural sciences division. A bioempath, officially, but the other children called her Ghost. Because she could walk past a man and flinch from a memory that wasn't hers. Because she could stare into an empty room and whisper the name of something long dead. Because she once touched a plant from Karin IV and said it was screaming, and then the plant died 3 days later. They stopped giving her pets after that. What saved her wasn't the science, it was a choice she made at 17. During an off-world expedition to study the aquatic memory fish of Neurali's prime, one of the crew was trapped in a submerged pod. The atmosphere was too toxic, rescuers failed. The man, delirious and drowning, began transmitting distress signals with fragmented thoughts, unable to form coherent words. Aeon dove in, not physically, but emotionally. She tuned her interface into his fear and let it wash over her. She rode the panic like a current, amplified it through her biointerface, and sent it pulsing through the emergency beacon. The signal broke protocol, but it worked. The ship's AI triangulated the pulse, broke the override lock, and saved him. Aeon was called a hero for about a week. Then they realized what she had done. She had linked minds not just passively, but willfully, not with a creature, with a human. And worse, she'd amplified trauma. That's when they gave her a choice. Join Project Reverent, the classified military operation to develop empathic weaponry. Or disappear quietly into the transport division, running diagnostics on cargo shuttles in dead sectors. Aeon chose exile, because the moment she felt that man's mind unravel beneath her, she understood something that others never would. Emotion wasn't meant to be weaponized. It was meant to heal. Now, drifting in the wreckage of the Solace Wing Asterisk, she had only that conviction to cling to. Her artificial limb still ached from the auto-amputation. Frost crept through the shuttle walls. Beyond the viewport, thousands of jagged ice asteroids drifted silently. as if the galaxy itself had shattered and frozen mid-scream. She wrapped the emergency blanket tighter around her chest and stared at her own reflection in the broken HUD screen. Her eyes, once full of fire, looked distant, pale. Her breath fogged and vanished like a lie too afraid to linger. Aeon blinked, then whispered, "What the hell am I doing here?" She had spent her life trying to prove that empathy could be a force for unity. That connection was a strength, not a vulnerability. And yet here she was, exiled, broken, forgotten by the very species she had once tried to save from itself. Her fingers brushed the neural interface port near her temple. It was old now, barely compatible with standard implants. But it still worked, still whispered. Some nights when the ship was quiet, she would tune into the void not to eavesdrop, but to feel less alone, now in this dying ship surrounded by frozen death and silence. She finally allowed herself to ask the question that had haunted her for years. Is empathy a curse? The world had always rewarded efficiency, control, detachment. Soldiers who killed without flinching were heroes. Scientists who silenced the alien unknown were saviors. But what of those who listened? What of those who wept? She remembered her last day at the Institute. Dr. Hallstrom, the woman who had raised her like a distant aunt, had said, "You were born with a gift, Aeon. But the universe doesn't need gifts right now. It needs weapons." Aeon had stared at her then, not with anger but heartbreak. "Maybe that's why the universe keeps breaking," she'd said. Now, with only hours of oxygen left, she curled into the corner of the cockpit, eyes fixed on the ice. It was beautiful in a way, the way the light from the distant blue star refracted through the crystal belts. It shimmered almost alive, like nerves under a translucent skin. And somewhere deep in that shimmering field, something pulsed back. She didn't know what it was, not yet, but it felt old. Wounded, buried in silence so long it had forgotten the shape of its own sorrow. And it called to her, not in words, not in signals, but in a feeling so familiar, so terribly human: loneliness. Aeon sat cross-legged on the icy floor of the broken shuttle, her breath slow and controlled. Her neural threads extended like the roots of a tree, seeking something buried far beneath the frost. The link had been fragile at first, a static hum beneath layers of compressed time, but now it pulsed. Not in words, but in sensations. At first it was pain. Not immediate or sharp, but ancient, a deep ache that lived in the bones of memory. Then came images, fragmented, scattered like glass shards over a frozen pond. A planet burning, sky cracked with crimson fire, oceans boiling under orbital firestorms. And always the same presence watching, not with rage, not with fear, but with a silence too heavy to name. She inhaled slowly. Rakai, she whispered, not a designation but a name. That was what she'd come to call it, this being locked in crystal, this myth buried in myth. The ice dragon was no mere animal, it was a conscious entity. A creature of memory and matter, its body fused with layers of crystal thought. And now it was speaking. Aeon adjusted the resonance dial on her interface, increasing the emotional conductivity. The neural threads wrapped tighter around her spine. The sensation intensified. This time the memory was clearer: humans. Dozens of them, armored in archaic exosuits, surrounding a cave of frost and light. Their helmets reflected the glowing tendrils of something immense, something trembling. And then came the soundless roar of a containment field locking down. The crystal light dimmed, the memory collapsed. Aeon gasped. The humans weren't explorers, they were hunters, and Rakai had been captured. Not once but many times, always by humans across cycles. Across stars, it had escaped, hidden itself, healed until they came again. Her kind, again and again, repeating the same mistake, fearing what they could not understand. She clenched her fists, bile rising in her throat. "No wonder you've stayed silent," she whispered. "We taught you to." But what struck her most wasn't the fear, it was the grief. Layered, recursive, infinite. A loop of sorrow encoded into the crystal tissue. The creature wasn't just alive. It was a asterisk living archive asterisk of pain. And in that moment, Aeon understood something terrible. The neural pattern embedded in Rakhai's memory, the command sequence that triggered its original containment, it matched an old military signature, one used by Project Reverend. One she had once been trained to detect. Her hand trembled. She pulled up the visual schematic from the memory, highlighted the signal origin, verified the encryption key. The hunter was her genetic ancestor, a woman named Dr. Selamirin. Aeon's eyes went wide. Her own bloodline had engineered the lock that turned a sentient creature into a prisoner of silence. She yanked the neural cable from her temple and staggered backward, breath ragged. Her mind throbbed with residual emotion, as if she had swallowed a thunderstorm. "Damn it," she cursed, kicking a loose panel across the floor. For a few seconds, she paced the broken shuttle like a caged animal. Then she froze. Out there, buried beneath megatons of crystal, was something that could crack open entire starfleets with a whisper. And now it had chosen to speak to her, because it remembered her blood. She didn't know whether to scream or beg. The shuttle creaked again. The ice outside was shifting. The gravitational pressure of the asteroid field would crush the hull in less than 2 hours. There were only 2 options. 1, wake Rakhai, use its power to escape the field. Hope it saw her as more than the child of betrayal. 2, let the cold take her, let the field collapse. Die silent, harmless, forgotten. She sat down and stared at her hand. It still bore the mark of her neural interface, a faint silver scar etched into the skin above her thumb. A symbol of all the times she tried to connect, to understand, to heal, but she remembered what happened the first time she reached too far. It was on Lyra 9. A machine hybrid species, the Vezoul, had requested contact with the Coalition. Aeon, then only 21, volunteered to establish a resonance bridge. It worked until it didn't. The Vezoul had no concept of emotional regulation. When Aeon fed empathy into the link, they tried to match it. But they couldn't stop. The feedback loop built into something unbearable. They shattered. 6 of them exploded from the inside out. Neural tissue ignited. The screams didn't stop for hours. Aeon survived barely. 3 surgeries, permanent nerve scarring. They called it an incident. She called it asterisk guilt asterisk. Now, years later, she sat across another impossible choice. Another alien mind. Another chance to bridge the void or break everything. She pressed her palm against the crystal interface. "I'm not her," she whispered. "I'm not Sela, I didn't trap you. I didn't hurt you, but I carry her name, her DNA, and maybe her debts." Silence, then a hum not from the interface but from inside her skull. A pulse, the same sensation she'd felt before, recognition. And this time something new, a question, not in words, but in meaning. "Will you use me or release me?" Aeon closed her eyes. The answer wasn't easy. It never was. She took a deep breath and whispered back, "I'll ask you to trust me, not obey." Then she connected again. The interface pulsed. The hull vibrated, and far below the ice began to melt. The sensors shrieked to life, a flicker at the edge of the scanner. Then another, then a full spectral ping, cold, pulsing, unmistakable. Not random drift, not natural motion, artificial. Aeon's stomach tightened as the neural HUD displayed the signature. Zurach-class scout frigate, designation Hound 6. She crawled to the shattered viewport, her body still weak from the neural sync. Beyond the frozen haze of the asteroid field, a jagged black vessel hovered, like a knife too cruel to be ceremonial. Its surface rippled with mirrored armor, light-bending nanoplates flexing with every movement. Predator tech, she adjusted the frequency receiver. The Zurak comms weren't encrypted. Arrogance always had its habits. Static buzzed, then voices deep, guttural, vibrating with layered intonations that didn't belong in any human throat. There, the resonance is recent. It moved. No. It stirred old pain, waking pain. Then it's true. The last egg still breathes. Aeon's fingers froze over the console. Egg the last. They weren't just hunting Rakai. They knew what it was. The Zurak revered ancient relics. But they harvested them too, especially biocrystalline entities, whose nervous systems could be processed into navigational engines, psychic weapons, and memory vaults. To them, Rakai wasn't a being. It was asterisk currency, asterisk asterisk. She leaned back against the hull, heart hammering. If they found it before she acted, they'd strip it. Hollow it, convert it into something obscene. She glanced at the fractured neural console. Her link with Rakai still glowed faintly, dormant, waiting. Another voice echoed through the static. Initiate descent. Breach the glacier. We take the relic before it wakes itself. Aeon's hands trembled. She had minutes, maybe less. No weapons, no allies, just herself and a creature who might remember her kind only as executioners. She stared down at her palm, the faint veins of the resonant network glowing beneath the skin. Her blood wasn't just human anymore, not since the implants. Not since they rewrote parts of her marrow to enhance emotional conductivity. Her breath caught, then steadied. She stood. There was one method left. One she had never attempted, a direct link, biochemical. Unfiltered, no interface, just blood. She ripped a panel from the floor, revealing the emergency medkit. No anesthesia, no caution. She pulled a sterile blade and tightened her jaw. This better work. In a single motion, she sliced across her forearm. Red welled up thick and luminous, threaded with strands of silver. Bioempathic serum, the result of years of genetic tweaking. Emotion, memory, signal, all encoded in every drop. She didn't wait. Aeon staggered toward the crystalline wall at the rear of the cavern, the chamber where Rakai slept. Its vast silhouette curled like a fossilized storm. She pressed her bleeding arm to the core interface, a spiral-shaped fracture glowing deep within the ice. The moment skin met crystal, everything shattered. She was no longer in her body. She was falling, through memories not her own. Flashes of stars being born and devoured, worlds singing and dying. A lattice of ice stretching across black space, humming with song the Rakai as they once were. A people of silence and vision, not dragons, not monsters. Just asterisk asterisk witnesses asterisk. Then came the ships, the metal storms. Human voices screaming orders, and the pain, the first containment. The first betrayal. She saw it all from Rakai's eyes. And in one heart-stopping moment, she saw the face of the woman who activated the first neural lock. Her eyes, her mouth, her DNA, Aeon, no Sella, her ancestor. The one who turned resonance into a cage. Aeon gasped within the vision, but the memory pressed on. She saw a future too, one not yet real. Humans and crystal forms sailing together across systems. Piloting with shared thought, breathing in tandem. A fragile alliance born from choice, not domination. A possible world, a forgotten chance, and then at last a question. A voice not in her ears but in her bones. Do you summon me as a weapon or as a companion? Aeon staggered back into her body with a choked gasp, falling to her knees. Blood steamed against the crystal, her breath fogged. And from within the ice a pulse, slow, measured, deliberate. Cracks spread across the cavern wall like lightning, each one glowing. The creature stirred. It did not roar. It asterisk remembered asterisk asterisk. The glacier shook as tons of ancient ice shifted, and the creature unfolded itself like a god rising from meditation. Its wings, glass-edged and veined with living light, expanded into the chamber. No face, no eyes, just a pulsing core, a presence that felt asterisk. Aeon stumbled back, heart in her throat, but it did not strike. It lowered its head and spoke, not aloud but into her thoughts. You are not the first, but you may be the last. I will not be bound again. Choose. The scout frigate outside opened fire. The cave trembled as seismic bursts tore through the outer crust. Light speared into the chamber, melting ice. Aeon rose, hand pressed to her bleeding arm, spine straight. I don't ask you to fight, she whispered. I ask you to remember. And choose with me. Rakai said nothing, but it moved. It turned toward the collapsing chamber, crystalline wings folding tight. Then, in a single motion, it burst upward, through layers of frozen centuries, into the void. Aeon followed, clinging to its back as the storm began. They came like a plague of black wings. 30 Zurak warships breached the asteroid field in tight formation. Engines cloaked in solar dust, ion trails masked by artificial interference. The lead dreadnought, Fang of Karzul Asterisk, bore the mark of their ancient war caste, a jagged helix of bone etched in frozen steel. Aeon watched from Rakai's back as they descended. She felt it before she saw it, the shift in the void, like pressure tightening around the heart. Zurak minds didn't think in individual threads. They were a chorus of intention, synchronized through an echo field that allowed them to move, strike, and decide as one. And now they had decided, not just to kill Rakai, but to erase her. The carrier contains a resonance anomaly, a Zurak commander's voice hissed over an intercepted channel. Human-fused hybrid, Protocol Omega-6 purge, no remains. Aeon tightened her grip on Rakai's crystalline neck. The great being hovered in low orbit. Wings of refracted light spread wide like tectonic plates suspended mid-break. Its body vibrated with dormant power, but unmoving. Waiting, I won't force you, Aeon whispered. You're not a weapon. Rakai pulsed beneath her, a single thrum of acknowledgement. Not submission, not command, something deeper, agreement. Aeon pressed the neural socket on her left forearm, aligning her bioempathic frequency with the crystalline interface nodes that lined Rakai's spine. 1,000 thin threads of light leapt from her skin and anchored to the dragon's body like roots finding their soil. And then they merged, not in flesh but in asterisk vision asterisk. Her consciousness expanded. She saw the field as Rakai saw it, not in shapes or ships, but in asterisk intention. The Zurak fleet burned like black fire in her awareness, a pulsing tide of fear, hunger, certainty. To them this was reclamation, cleansing, dominance renewed. She could feel their network trying to filter her presence, to categorize her as threat, anomaly, virus. Their minds searched for a pattern to contain her. She gave them one. Aeon didn't push commands through Rakai's nervous system. She opened her own memories. She gave them sorrow. The sorrow of centuries frozen in crystal, of betrayal layered upon betrayal, of a young girl holding the hand of a creature no one understood and choosing to believe. Pain flooded the ether, not violence, not rage, grief. The Zurak formation faltered. 3 corvettes veered out of alignment. Their echo signatures cracked, spasming under cognitive overload. One pilot collapsed mid-signal, his body twitching in its shell. Another ship fired prematurely, striking its own escort in panic. Aeon wept not from joy, but the asterisk weight asterisk of it. Each wave of emotion sent through Rakai was amplified tenfold, mirrored back in memories, echoing across circuits that had only known cold logic. The Zurak were warriors, but even warriors could drown in a sea they'd never learned to swim. She tightened the resonance flow, sent another pulse, not of command but of asterisk forgiveness asterisk. And then the battlefield cracked. The Zurak dreadnought opened fire. A massive plasma beam tore across the field, carving through 3 minor asteroids and slamming into Rakhai's left wing. Ice shattered, crystal split. Aeon screamed as pain knot her lance through her spine, a shared agony mirrored between species. But Rakhai did not fall. With a soundless roar, the ice dragon twisted through the debris, its wings reforming mid-flight with brilliant streaks of violet energy. Aeon guided their movement not by instruction, but by instinct, each pulse of her thoughts shaping trajectory, velocity, vector. They danced through the asteroid field like lightning made flesh. But they couldn't run forever. Another cruiser locked on. Aeon shifted the link, reversed emotional polarity. She fed the ship's pilot not sorrow, but compassion asterisk asterisk. A strange, overwhelming peace that made no sense in war. I see you, her thoughts whispered into the Zurak echo field. You don't have to be this. The pilot's mind flickered. He hesitated, then shut down his weapons array. Another ship followed. Then another. The field began to fracture asterisk asterisk. Rakhai's wings surged with radiant heat. They weren't destroying the fleet. They were asterisk asterisk disassembling asterisk it. One heart at a time, but not all chose peace. The dreadnought powered its primary core. A singularity cannon, enough to erase an entire moon, charged and locked onto Rakhai's chest. Aeon felt it building, the void condensing, space folding inward. Rakhai turned toward it not to flee, but to face asterisk asterisk. No, Aeon whispered, we don't die like this. Rakhai's thoughts brushed against hers. Then show me how to live. Aeon closed her eyes. And opened everything. She dropped all mental barriers. Her childhood, her scars, the labs, the pain of not belonging. The terror of failing every being she had ever tried to save. She bared her asterisk entire, humanity asterisk to the ice dragon. And Rakhai, once imprisoned, once forgotten, bore it with her. Together they surged forward, not to kill, but to make the Zurak see. The singularity cannon fired, and struck empty space. Aeon and Rakhai blurred past it, wrapping their wings around the cannon's gravitational lensing and folding it inwards. Turning collapse into inversion, the cannon shattered from within. The dreadnought convulsed and broke apart, its echo field rupturing in 1,000 screams. But no final explosion came, only silence. Aeon floated above the remnants of the battlefield, her neural interface flickering at its limits, her face streaked with tears and frost. Beneath her, Rakhai hovered, breathing, glowing, whole. The remaining Zurak ships pulled back, no surrender. No promise, but they left, because they didn't know how to fight someone who refused to become a weapon. Aeon laid a hand on Rakhai's spine, her fingers trembling. We didn't win, she whispered. Rakhai's thoughts replied, no. But we remembered who we were. And for the first time in her life, Aeon believed that was enough. The battle ended not with an explosion, but with a withdrawal. The Zurak fleet splintered, not from firepower but fracture of intent. Some ships broke formation and drifted into deep orbit, blinking out of sensors as they cloaked and vanished into the void. Others powered down their weapons, hovering silently as if in mourning, before slowly turning away. And a few surrendered, not with ceremony, not with flags or handshakes, but with open comms and silence, the Zurak way of saying, we do not understand but we will not continue asterisk. No one on any human vessel could explain what had happened. How a woman in a stripped-down transport ship emerged riding a mythical creature carved from ice and memory. How a single empath had silenced an entire war fleet with something no one could track on scanners. No one could explain it, but no one challenged it either. Because the evidence was written across the stars. Aeon was offered medals, of course, commendations, honor, invitations to speak before the United Terran Assembly, military commissions, research grants, the typical arsenal of applause designed to smooth over the unease of miracles. She declined them all. The only reward she accepted was silence. She left the orbital dock 2 days later aboard a small, unregistered cruiser. No destination filed, no official mission, only one companion. Rack high, they returned to the Shatterfall expanse, the frozen asteroid field where it all began, and chose a place where the stars burned softly behind drifting ice. There, among the quiet fractures of time, they built something new. It wasn't a city, it wasn't a base, it was a ** way station. Neutral territory, unarmed, open only to those who came in peace, regardless of origin, form, biology, or thought pattern. A place where no species was dissected, studied, recruited, or feared. No signatures required, no scans, no chains. The station had no name. But among those who visited, it was called many things: the quiet star, the listening gate, the place that did not kill. Some called it myth, others heresy, but travelers still found it guided by rumors, coordinates passed in whispers. Or sometimes by instinct, because something in the void had changed. And someone had made that change possible. Aeon no longer wore a uniform. She didn't carry weapons. She tended to the station systems by hand, growing food in hydro gardens, repairing communications nodes, programming translation matrices that didn't assume dominance. She spent her evenings outside the observation dome, curled against the inner hull of the docking ring, speaking to visitors and listening, really listening, to stories that didn't come in words. Some were whispered in scent, others vibrated through walls. Some came in memories projected through shape or heat. Aeon understood them all, not because she had power, but because she had chosen not to close herself off. Rakai hovered in orbit, never landing, never caged, a silent guardian of memory and possibility. Some visitors swore it no longer looked like a dragon. Others said it had grown wings of glass, or stretched into a living corridor of light. Aeon never corrected them, because every being saw something different. And maybe that was the point. One afternoon, while realigning the resonance grid, Aeon felt a presence at her side. She turned to see a Zurak child, no older than 10 in human years, watching her with wide, blinking eyes. The child was part of a delegation of refugees from a war-torn border planet. They had come seeking medical assistance and rest. Aeon had offered both without hesitation. The child tilted its head and asked, in hesitant common tongue, "Are you a goddess?" Aeon paused, then smiled. Her voice was soft but steady. "No, I'm just someone who listened to a scream no one else could hear, and chose not to run from it." The child nodded but said nothing more. It didn't need to. Later that evening, Aeon sat at the edge of the docking platform, feet dangling above a shaft of starlight. The cold kissed her cheeks, and the air smelled faintly of iron drift and metal moss, a scent she had grown to love. Rakai hovered in the distance, its core pulsing like a second sun. Their link was quiet tonight, not severed, just resting. Aeon let the silence wash over her. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like she was waiting to be understood. She simply was. In her mind, she replayed the moment, the turning point, when the Zurak fleet faltered. Not because she overpowered them, not because she found a weapon greater than theirs, but because she offered something they had no defense against: vulnerability. Not as a weakness, but as a bridge. Emotion doesn't need to be a weapon, she thought. Sometimes it's a door. That night in her private logs, not for publication, not for fame, Aeon wrote a single entry. "We once thought survival meant strength, but perhaps survival means knowing what not to destroy. Being human isn't about dominance. It's about knowing when to listen to the cries no one else hears and answering. With something other than fear, she signed it not as commander, not as doctor, just Aeon. 10 years had passed since the battle at Shatterfall. The incident was no longer classified, though that didn't mean it was understood. Military archives referred to it as the fracture pause asterisk, a term as clinical as it was inaccurate. Scientific journals debated terminology like asterisk symbiotic resonance alignment, asterisk, sentient empathy field convergence asterisk, or emotion-based subspace disruption asterisk. But in the Intergalactic Symposium on Neural Ethics and Post-Species Diplomacy, held at the edge of Solaria Station in orbit around a blue dwarf, one voice brought clarity. Not through explanation, but through memory. Dr. Alain Verk, senior researcher at the Cross-Species Cognitive Lab, stepped forward on the final day of the symposium. The room fell silent, not because of her credentials, but because she had once been there. Not at Shatterfall, but later, when Aeon first returned to known space, with Rakai silently watching from orbit. Dr. Verk tapped the edge of the lectern. Holograms of the battlefield hovered around her, Zurak ships scattered like dark feathers across a lattice of ice and light, Rakai in full wingspan. Aeon on its back, eyes closed, no weapons, just connection. The data floated, untranslatable. Emotion had no exact waveform. This, Dr. Verk began, is what we call the empathic ice resonance event. It was never replicated, not in lab conditions, not in combat simulations, not even in controlled neural sharing environments. She turned to face the audience. We tried to rebuild her interface. We succeeded. We tried to copy her genetic pattern. We succeeded. We tried to fabricate an artificial Rakai from trace crystalline memory samples. She paused, and we failed. There was silence in the auditorium, respectful, unsettled. Dr. Verk continued, because what Aeon achieved was not technological. It was ethical, emotional, volitional. You cannot manufacture what she gave, not in code, not in circuits. The projection shifted, displaying decrypted excerpts from Aeon's final logs. Her voice was soft, unassuming, recorded in the dim echo of a dome beneath starlight. Being human was never about breaking chains, Aeon had said. It was about knowing when to free someone, even when no one else dares. No applause followed, just stillness, the kind that demanded introspection. Dr. Verk looked out again, this time not at scholars, but at future builders of diplomacy, technology, and law. She didn't win by firepower. She didn't win by invention. She won by offering a hand instead of raising a weapon. And the galaxy, fractured, bloodied, exhausted, finally paused long enough to notice. She took a breath. Aeon's link with Rakai was not domination. It was asterisk mutuality asterisk, and that terrifies those who live by control. After the symposium, the footage was archived, but it never made headlines. The wars continued elsewhere, territories shifted. Treaties were signed, then broken. New AI models rose. Entire planets were mined to silence, but somewhere, in a pocket of unmapped space near the Shatterfall expanse, that way station still flickered beneath drifting ice. Pilgrims came, not to worship, but to remember. Some left messages, others just stayed long enough to hear silence. And once every cycle, the station's broadcast pulse transmitted a phrase, not in language, but in harmonic resonance, a frequency embedded in neural-compatible patterns, felt rather than heard. Those who translated it rendered it as this: if you're human, don't ask how many enemies you can defeat. Ask if, when one reaches out with claws, you still choose to open your hands. No one ever found Aeon again, or if they did, they never spoke of it. Some say she became part of the station, not metaphorically, but literally. that her consciousness diffused into the resonance grid, guiding lost travelers by intuition and memory. Others believe she left long ago, sailing with Rakai to places emotion has not yet reached. But one truth remains, written in the quiet awe of those who heard the Zurak sing for the first time, not in war tones, but in something raw and uncertain: grief, hope, forgiveness. Humanity no longer species-bound, and so the legacy was not one of conquest, nor invention, nor blood, but of choice. A single moment when one woman refused to inherit fear, refused to pass on control, refused to turn connection into a weapon, and instead dared to become a bridge.